Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. In this season's premiere episode, I toyed around with making alterations to a middle-of-the-road story that I think might have played out better without so much rebooting. Batman Eternal was one thing, but what about the follow-up, which delivered infinitely more ire?
That becomes kinda tricky. The first Maxi series had something to it, even if it was kind of derivative and not nearly as introspective as it claimed. Batman and Robin Eternal was basically all about how great Bluebird was without really trying, how everyone adored her terrible and unlikable personality, how poorly she treated others, and how she was the be-all, end-all sidekick because Tinian said so. Since she doesn't exist in this scenario...
Oh, thank God.
The story would require a lot more reworking already, let alone the fact that neither Cass nor her father are replaced by atrociously terrible clones.
However, the idea of a villain like Mother isn't terrible, but it could definitely use a tune-up. So let's give it a shot fixing Batman and Robin Eternal.
The story would still see, as before, the three Robins working together to stop the forgettable villain, except that it's Proxy's hacking that helps turn the tables. Secret Agent Grayson and Tim are wary of working alongside Jason Todd. Oh, he swears he's on the straight and narrow using rubber bullets, but the other two aren't totally sold on him yet. Also, I'd reintegrate the idea that Todd was a redhead, but as Robin got into a habit of dyeing his hair black so no one would be suspicious, though he's recently stopped doing that. The tense conversation between the three leads to how Bruce, since his big endgame fight with Joker, has lost his memory, the Batcave is in mothballs, and Jim Gordon got into shape, becoming GCPD's Batman, mech suit and all.
I'm going with the idea that all his doubt about his age and mental state while he was framed had a kind of epic rebound effect. Jim felt more invigorated than he had in years, and while there was still a learning curve, he embraced the opportunity to fill the void left by his old friend, and to prove, especially to himself, that he was not ready for the rest home just yet.
He's still got places to be, so the Spiral Agent still ends up at Gotham State University just as before. I'm not sure how many state universities are named after cities, but that isn't important now. Playing out much like in the original, he's on comms with Poppy, reflecting on the old encounter with Scarecrow, maybe not their first, but perhaps one of the earliest, or possibly one of the last before he became Nightwing, and attacked by children talking about Mother. He escapes before encountering a killer in white, and Poppy still betrays him. He motors while trying to contact his allies, and receives a signal telling him to get to the Batcave. It's there that he encounters Cassandra Cain. She sent the signal, also contacting Barbara, Steph, and Tim, whom Jason tagged along with. Since Bruce's amnesia, Cass chose to maintain Batman Inc. duties in Hong Kong, where she came across some people attempting to abduct homeless children who happened to have lost their parents recently. The would-be kidnappers were surprisingly skilled and seemed too zealous to be run-of-the-mill traffickers. In discussion, one of them happened to mention the name Mother, not in reference to their biological matron. The context sounded too different for that. When Grayson mentions his partner's betrayal and gun-toting kids, Tim and Jason mention they stopped a jewelry store heist in the Narrows, only for a bunch of kids no older than 12 to lunge at them from nowhere.
A little knockout gas took care of them non-violently. Just as well, it was way past their bedtimes.
Barbara and Stephanie arrived right from their homes, swinging and gliding their way to the cave, avoiding the streets. Tim activates the Bat computer to look up Mother, but nothing comes up. Maybe this is a new player, but Babs works at computer magic and finds a restricted file they can't open. Obviously, they call Alfred since they can't call Bruce! It dawns on Grayson that if he, Tim, and Jason were attacked, it's likely that their mentor is in danger too, all the more vulnerable given his memory loss.
I'll scan the space frequency modulator with my remote control array to find Batman.
They've called Alfred, who's still on the line. He's not only in Gotham, but keeping an eye on Master Wayne from a distance, using the skills he acquired during his days in British intelligence. Remember, this Bruce was much more amiable, less weighed down by the loss of his parents, so he'd rely less on Alfred's services as he spends more time working at the Lucius Fox Center for Gotham Youth. He still attends a gala surrounded by Mother's minions, and Grayson races to his aid.
But he's not alone. Alfred is posing as one of the waitstaff and stealthily takes out a couple would-be killers before fighting them outright by the time the spy arrives. He's not going kung fu or anything and takes more than a few lumps, but does his fair share, and then some.
Another kind of tricky element is Duke's team of Robins. I never picked up the series, so I can't weigh in on them much, but I've chosen to leave them in with the major change that since Zero Year was never a thing, Duke didn't figure out Batman's identity and formed the team by inspiration and a drive to fight crime like the official sidekicks, just without their gear and training. Whereas Batgirl showed up originally, I figured she'd stay in the cave to try opening up that file. Instead, Spoiler arrives, though preferably in her Batgirl togs. Yeah, it causes some confusion, but funny confusion. When all the henchmen are down for the count, Steph makes sure Alfred is well enough to join her on a Batcycle back to the cave, while Grayson stays behind to give his standard warning to Duke about the vigilante life, though he finds it curious these teenagers are not acting up at the moment. He also does his Mr. Sparrow routine for Bruce before returning to the cave, where Alfred's minor injuries have been taken care of. Babs still hasn't managed to open the file despite her hacking skills, and Pennyworth says the file will only respond to a vocal command from one of two voices, Bruce's or his own.
A couple years after the first Robin joined, Master Wayne returned from an overseas mission that he never discussed, and it seemed to unnerve him. He called his butler to the cave one day while the young ward was preoccupied elsewhere, and requested Alfred to record his voice for opening a confidential file in the event Batman couldn't for whatever reason.
Opening the file now reveals Batman's message. This time it wouldn't be so melodramatic as "my greatest sin," and probably just a video file, because what purpose does a hologram serve, really? He explains that there was a secret he kept from everyone about a woman known only as Mother and her vast network that had been in operation for years by the time he became aware of it. She took in children that had nowhere else to go and groomed them to be the perfect infiltrators, skilled observers, and deadly combatants.
I once scored 4 touchdowns in a single game for Coke.
He hints that she's apparently dead, but would likely have contingencies just like me. Some shame would appear on his face as he pauses. He continues that he got sloppy and mentions to Grayson specifically that she managed to instill a lingering fear that would peck at him for the rest of his life. In the event this recording is played, it means Mother's orphanage is back in full force, likely planning a large attack, and those close to Bruce Wayne are in danger, while also being the only ones to stop whatever danger lies ahead. The recording ends, leaving the group dumbfounded, Cassandra ironically breaking the silence by noting that his body language suggested he saw some unsettling similarities between himself and this foe. "Fear," Tim repeats from the video. "Pecking." He deduces that Bruce was leaving a clue, specifically for his first sidekick, and that it somehow involves the Scarecrow. This makes sense to the spy, who recalls one mission that made Bruce seem more on edge than usual, involving chasing Crane from Gotham to Santa Prisca to Prague. Tim will see what he can dig up in the first stop, with Jason backing him. Not an idea Drake much likes, but there you have it. Cassandra insists on accompanying Grayson to Prague, while Babs and Steph stay behind to keep an eye on Gotham and Bruce, with Proxy coordinating their efforts.
Red's Hood and Robin do have a run-in with Bane, but only because he's a big name in those parts, and it's not like they're in a position to drag him back to Gotham. Instead of infiltrating a prison turned sanctuary for the Order of St. Dumas, Tim figures he'd ask the Brute if he's heard anything about someone called Mother or orphaned children going missing in Santa Prisca.
He hasn't, and further digging shows that Scarecrow didn't stay very long, soon jumping onto another plane to Prague. The intention was to throw the original dynamic duo off his trail, so the island is just a dead end. There would be a brawl with Bane, one that would likely see him about to crush Tim, only for Jason to use non-lethal means to save him, showing he is trying to better himself and respect Batman's teachings again. They'd also be attacked by more orphan assassins, because Mother still wants them dead and all. This portion of the story would also include flashbacks to Tim and Jason's respective eras as Robin, moments they naturally shined, other areas where they needed to improve, and how it plays into their present mission, like learning from past mistakes.
You have learned something, and I have learned something. Too bad we didn't learn it sooner. We could have gone to the movies instead.
As this road trip continues, Black Bat and Grayson arrive in Batman's Prague hideout, something the spy hasn't seen since the Scarecrow mission. He checks the computer and finds another folder labeled in such a way that most would overlook, but Dick thinks it's the file on Mother. He connects it with Proxy to open it, but it doesn't require a voice command, just a password. Richard John Grayson. There are several video files, with anywhere between weeks, months, or years in between recordings. each chronicling Batman's further investigation into Mother's network, deaths or other crimes they may have been responsible for, and suspected operatives. A more complete list is included in a PDF, alongside reasons for suspicion like lack of birth certificate or uncertain background, as well as percentages rating their likelihood as Mother's minions.
Grayson clicked one video and started from there, just out of random, not necessarily in any order. He was trying to figure out what was on them, get the gist of it, and figured Bruce must have recorded them when he could, in between other investigations and responsibilities. This Mother character really seemed to get under his skin, which he confirms when he clicks on the first video, one that had seen several edits and revisions.
Richard figured that the first video file would have Bruce elaborating on Mother, possibly showing further vulnerability, and the thought of that kind of unnerved him, so he intentionally avoided it for a while. But eventually Cassandra would gently encourage him to finally open it. Batman recounts tracking Scarecrow in Prague, facing some of his men, and Grayson, then Robin, slipping up and getting hit with fear gas. Crane got away, so Bats took his ward to the Prague cave to recover, which probably wouldn't be covered in skulls in this version. Seriously, are cabin walls in Prague actually littered with skeletons or something? While the boy Wonder rested, Bats pursued Crane, finding him speaking with an older woman. He sets up his listening equipment, but misses most of the conversation, just hearing details about a shipment for the next night, with a distraction for Batman in another location. "Good," the woman says. "I'd hate for my ballet tickets to go to waste." The two part ways, and Batman decides to let Crane go for now. He's got a sick ward to look after.
This was before he really studied the fear gas in detail, so he was surprised the classic home remedy of lemon-lime soda, chicken soup, and oyster crackers wasn't helping Grayson get any better.
Present-day Grayson, present Dayson, recalls fighting through the fear gas, and how he felt well enough to join Batman in stopping Crane's fear gas bomb. Robin was tasked with disarming it while Batman fought Crane, but pulled the wrong wire. Fortunately, it was a dud, like a sick joke on Scarecrow's part, but it didn't stop the teenager from feeling like he let his mentor down.
Lousy traumatic childhood.
So just as he realizes he didn't know anything about any kind of shipment, the Bat recording says that Bruce had tipped off local authorities to take care of it, and there was time left for him and Grayson to catch a ballet performance. Bats was going to inform his sidekick of the mysterious shipment after a night of culture, and the old woman was taken away in handcuffs, but it never happened. During intermission, the woman made her way backstage. Bruce followed, alone. The meet is performed coyly, the rich man pretending to be a lost tourist, but Mother reveals she knows both his identities. Wayne's extra careful, so not just anyone could figure it out, but she did, because she intended to adopt him, though of course things didn't go that way. It's what she did, find orphans of the world, take them in, and sharpen their minds and bodies so she can make the world a better place. In fact, she suggests they meet elsewhere to further discuss the matter, without young Grayson.
At this early stage, Batman isn't used to people finding out who's under the cowl. Though these days, it's like everyone finds out and it's never really a big deal. Oh hey, Two-Face knows, and it goes nowhere.
After a night of what he saw as boring performance art, Grayson prepped for the flight home while Bruce secretly met with Mother. She pontificated about the state of the world and had eyes everywhere to confirm as much. He accuses her of human trafficking, spying, but she insists she's merely raising children right, becomes a new mother to the unwanted, and they go on to be leaders of business, politicians, or parts of those families, through marriage or adoption, and they call and write to her about what they see, how things could be better. In some ways not too different from Wayne taking in the acrobat.
When I do it, it's cute!
This all sounds way too convenient for the Dark Knight, and he ain't buying. She mentions how Robin has messed up on this mission and ones before, and believes she can offer a more suitable protege, one that will be a vast improvement, the ideal heir to the Dark Knight's legacy that his drive couldn't possibly say no to. Bats refuses just before dodging an attack from Orphan Prime. Instead of a dumber version of David Kane that speaks in empty poetry, this would be a killer so devoted to Mother that he cast off his old name to be her top enforcer. He's no pushover, but is unable to keep Bruce from escaping. Exactly what Mother wanted. He returns to Grayson, who took his stern demeanor as disappointment in his actions with the bomb. It becomes something of an argument, Batman so focused on what Mother said that he fails to handle his end of the discussion with more tact. It's a quiet plane ride home with an unconscious Scarecrow in the back, Richard thinking he's being treated unfairly, and Batman unsettled at how easily Mother uncovered his secret. Weeks go by, and Robin's frustrations about the fake bomb lend itself to sloppiness, letting a thug get the drop on him or misjudging distance during a swing on a grapnel line, other instances where Batman was close enough to help him out. Bruce gives him a few nights off and is out on patrol alone when he encounters Orphan Prime again, who gives him the option of another fight or accepting Mother's offer.
Hey, you! Let's fight! Them's fighting words.
Bats chooses the latter on the condition that he meets this prospective new ally. He arranges another flight to Prague, claiming he just wants to make sure Crane didn't leave behind any surprises, but goes as one of his undercover alter egos. Soon enough, a second meeting begins at a modest school with several dozen children and a few instructors, Mother showing Bruce the various mental and physical disciplines her children undergo. If her intentions were so noble, why does she have someone as deadly as Orphan at her side? Oh, is the man that uses gadgets and traps to ensnare criminals with a teenager to aid him, wondering why an old woman has a bodyguard?
She plays it off like some people just don't appreciate her taking the children in, and would even go so far as to lash out at her physically. She could defend herself in those days, but eventually one of her children took it upon themselves to be her sworn protector. Bruce thinks that explains it pretty well. A little too well.
Any of her kids would jump at the chance to join the Batman's war on crime, so Mother offers to let Bruce choose his successor and arrange for delivery when he's fired Grayson. But he refuses. Turns out, after being given the address to the school, Bruce did some digging on his flight, discovering that it was an abandoned property, and reasoned that the shipment deal she had with Crane was never investigated because she had a mole in the local police. So this time, he sent an alert to every precinct in Prague and the surrounding cities, figuring she couldn't have compromised all of them. Orphan attacks, and I imagine a scene of Bruce shedding his civilian clothes to reveal his batsuit underneath while he's fighting the killer off. In full Crusader garb, the children calmly exit the school while a couple instructors join the fight. Mother attempts to leave, only for a bat bolo to restrain her. The fight eventually involves specialized combustive weapons, small explosives and the like, which causes a fire. And since the school was mostly a farce and not up to code, it's going up like kindling.
If I blow up, aren't you going to die too? I hadn't thought of that.
The flames separate Orphan from Mother, and Batman, who can still collect her, dragging her out as the authorities arrive. Here we can use her defiant use of poison and police fire preventing Batman from administering an antidote. He'd later check the morgue, only to find she was cremated after the autopsy, paperwork showing that's what she wanted in the event of her death.
Thus concluding a long flashback. But hey, we're consolidating several flashbacks for the sake of brevity, and fixing some serious plot holes.
The video ends with Batman suspecting Mother was still alive, but he could never prove it. When able, he's been investigating possible operatives carrying on her legacy, finding her reach went far beyond a single country, let alone a Czech Republic city. This recording was in case she resurfaced after his death, or on some extended Justice League mission or otherwise unable to be of assistance. He cites the recent activity of the Joker as reason for this final log, indicating it was probably recorded around a few months before the memory wipe, and closes saying that he has full confidence in every one of his allies. The video completes and Grayson is stunned by the enormity of the revelation. Between Gotham, the Justice League, Wayne Enterprises, how did he keep up with all this? Perhaps he found spare time? I don't know if Batman is even capable of spare time. Maybe this is why. Proxy has already started going through the list of possible children of Mother, and stops at someone with a 72% likelihood, Sarengarel Jalère, a prima ballerina who happens to be performing that night in Prague. Looks like we're going to the ballet, Cassandra. Hope you have more fun than I did. It's decided that Black Bat, in an outfit capable of concealing her costume, will walk in with the other patrons, while Grayson goes in spy style, much like before, intending to investigate and question Sarah. Cass still enjoys the ballet, still enthralled by it, and best of all, no Harper Row. Grayson is lurking in the back, having observed Sarah before she went on stage. He's confronted by an older woman that catches him by surprise. Her calm demeanor and use of his real name is a shock before he realizes it's Mother. Instead of the disappointing mystery of the ultimate Robin, she counters Agent 37's accusation of child abduction and trafficking with how she's made her children pillars of society, since unlike some circus boys, they didn't have a billionaire to shelter them.
Tell me, Richard, how many lost children did Bruce take into his home without enlisting them into his quest for revenge on random acts of violence? How many orphaned children could he house and protect in that big mansion of his?
Grayson considers that a weird reason to have a bunch of kids try and kill him, and certainly calls into question her parenting skills. The attacks on the Robins was a calculated risk of revealing herself, as they may have been privy to Batman's intel on her network, and the most likely to interfere with her plans regardless. She cites Bruce as one part of a global problem. Even those with the best intentions do barely what they could. It hardly makes them better than those who personally profit from ignoring or outright killing children. The time for all that to change is soon at hand, she says, as Orphan lunges at Grayson with a killing strike. Or it would have been had Cassandra not shown up to intercept. Intermission? Lucky for you. I was enjoying the show. Watching Cass grapple with her top fighter, Mother muses out loud. About 10 years ago, one of her agents tried to bring in a little girl, but she was wary, defensive, as if she could tell something wasn't right, and had quite a punch, before she ran off, never to be spotted again. Mother shakes it off, chuckling about how so many of those that got away ended up working for the same misguided man. When Grayson tries to stop her from leaving, Sarah the ballerina intervenes, showing off surprisingly capable fighting skills. Right. Intermission. Eventually the two switch opponents, with Cass knocking out the dancer, humorously apologizing because she really did enjoy her performance. Orphan seems momentarily distracted, as if he's being contacted, then warns of impending doom while throwing down a smoke bomb to cover his escape with Sarah. Instead of chasing him down, Grayson has another idea. He has Proxy connect him with Jason and Tim, and arranges to meet at Spiral headquarters.
Now you might be wondering what it's been like for Barbara and Stephanie in Gotham. In between thugs to punch in the face, Babs confers with Proxy when she can, see what they can suss out of Bruce's investigation into Mother. Spoiler is getting used to more frequent patrols again, but no kids have been randomly attacking her out of the blue, which weirdly makes her feel kind of left out.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message. I love you. Now back to our show.
The Robins and Black Bat arrive at Spiral, greeted by Matron. Being pre-Flashpoint, I don't think Helena Bertinelli would be in charge, so we can figure it's just another woman who goes by that code name. Jason could snark that it's essentially the synonym for the enemy they're fighting, Matron, Mother, and all that, but she could point a gun at his head and tell him to just shut up. Anyway, Grayson has been waiting on an explanation on why Poppy turned on him, and it's as puzzling to the head of the agency as it is to him. She's since gone off-grid, destroyed her nanites, and is in the wind. Furthermore, Spiral's got bupkis on anyone going by Mother, meaning she's not just someone that got lucky enough to miss Batman's notice, she's extra secretive and probably not as altruistic as she appears. While they're trying to figure things out, Poppy secretly infiltrates the all-girls academy and releases fear gas, and after a few minutes, drops a device on the floor. After a moment of experiencing their deepest fears, the device activates the Ichthys signal, and the students then calm down, compose themselves, then start attacking the faculty, repeating the word Mother over and over. When Matron and the others get word of the chaos up top, she, Cass, Grayson, and Red Hood gas mask up and go to deal with the students, while Tim works with Dr. Netz to develop a counteragent to the fear gas, a formula for which Red Robin has memorized. It might work faster with Proxy's help, but Spiral doesn't trust outsiders that easily when connecting to their systems. The fight against the students is a difficult one, not helped with several instructors succumbing to fear gas, and the disparity is rather perplexing. In the fight, Black Bat's mask is knocked off, and she breathes in the gas, seeing visions of piles of dead bodies, their blood on her hands, and her family and friends rejecting her. Except for her biological parents, they're pretty stoked that she's just like them. But soon she begins feeling a sense of calm.
Yeah, I'm also surprised I didn't write that her horrific vision was seeing her retconned orphan self. Though just as well, a sight that terrifying would have broken her mind.
Jason's helmet already has a filter feature, but some of the students gang up and remove it, exposing him to the gas. He sees himself delighting and laughing at murdering everyone in sight, then removing his mask to reveal the Joker's face. The counter-agent is complete and is sent through the vents of the school, which alleviates everyone hallucinating, but the students don't seem affected and press their assault. Netz detects a strange signal originating from a foreign device that she guides Grayson to, and he immediately destroys it. As they guessed, the students slowly come out of their combative states, unsure what just happened. Everyone is barely able to catch their breath when there's an alert. One of their most private subsystems has been breached, and Matron hurries to one of the lower levels with Grayson close behind. They encounter Poppy, who's just finished downloading some ill-gotten info onto a thumb drive. She fights her ex-boss and ex-partner using some spiral tech she held onto as an advantage and escapes. After the dust is settled and everyone has begun recovering, Jason begins apologizing profusely to Tim and Dick, who he'd caused so much harm in the past. He doesn't want to get into what he saw now, but Cassandra can vouch for his sincerity. She wants to speak of her own experience, not the fear vision, but what came after. A calming voice, a loving tone, telling her everything would be all right, everything can be made better, so long as they did what Mother said. Namely, kill their adult authority figures. As comforting as it felt, she was fighting the command to kill when the counteragents spread and nullified the fear gas.
This version of Cassandra, having become Batgirl at age 17, has aged a couple of years since then, so now she'd be near or well past legal American drinking age. I know the signal originally had an 18 and under clause, but I think it can be given leeway here, since it's not like you become a completely mentally mature adult the second your 18th birthday hits.
Todd, however, doesn't recall hearing anything. Adding the cast didn't follow the command like the agents in training, Tim reasons that the fear gas must work to weaken the subject in a way that the signal can exploit, transmitting a message to coax the affected into Mother's employ as an alternative to feeling fear, but it must be intended to affect younger people. It's a theory he'll have to run past Proxy when he gets a chance. Grayson turns to a sullen matron, asking about Poppy and how she could have been turned. Long con, the headmistress figures, probably working for Mother the entire time, and is only ditching her coven now under orders. As for the computer she infiltrated, it controls the Somnus satellite, which still has its world-reaching capabilities as in the original story. This time, however, instead of magic hand sigils that just take the information from people's brains, activating the satellite would require Matron's fingerprints and voice. Given how long Poppy was operating, she'd probably recorded Matron speaking, and the data she stole contains her passcodes. And Matron's favorite coffee cup, covered in her fingerprints, went missing last week.
Yeah, seems pretty basic, but it makes a lot more sense than that. A useful technique used once for convenience. Who says writing is hard?
Fortunately, Matron managed to tag Poppy with some tracking nanites in their fight, but her agents are all recovering from fear gas and may become liabilities in the field. Grayson has full confidence in his team. Don't you mean my team? That's when Damien arrives on his mutant bat dog thing, insinuating that the Bat's sidekicks and allies are under his command now that his father is out of commission. Red Robin, ignoring the standard condescension, contacts Proxy, updating her on the situation and saying someone in Gotham should look into a possible lead. Scarecrow is in his hideout, plotting another scheme, when he's confronted by Orphan Prime. He tries to kill the Doc, but stopped by Batgirl and Spoiler, the latter of whom keeps her mask on. They were on their way to question him anyway. During the fight, the killer exposits how Mother is saving the world, and those who lived comfortable lives with their own parents could never understand the plight of the discarded. They're protecting people who've corrupted the world, and they'll burn alongside them. He throws a blade neither woman can stop from hitting Crane in his torso. He takes off while the vigilantes tend to the stocky doctor, figuring the blade didn't seem to hit anywhere fatal, but this orphan isn't terrible at his job. There's something coating the blade, likely a poison of some kind, and Proxy calls an ambulance, Spoiler insisting that the doctor reveal what he knows about Mother. Maybe he promises to strike fear in those responsible, because the bats tend to do that. After looking at her for a moment, he reveals that way back when in Prague, Mother had purchased a small batch of fear gas, claiming it was for disciplinary purposes, and since he needed capital, he gave her an older formula with a more limited shelf life. One odd thing was, she asked how it would fare in sub-freezing temperatures. That's when he loses consciousness. The ambulance arrives just as Proxy has pinpointed what kind of poison was on the blade, but since neither Spoiler nor Batgirl had the appropriate antidote on them, they tell the medics and leave them to it as they see if they can pick up Orphan's trail.
Keep in mind that this time Orphan is not a retcon David Kane, so they can't just listen for the sound of poetry-adjacent drooling ramblings trying to pass off as complex characterization.
They're contacted by Grayson, swap some information, and it's revealed that Poppy's tracking signal was headed north as it gets, which matches Crane's information. Mother's base is at the North Pole. It's curious how she built a stronghold there, but then Jason mentions there do exist spots in the Arctic with volcanoes she could use as an energy source. Everyone's kind of surprised that came from him. What, Didn't the boss ever drill that kind of random information to your heads? With little time to lose, Agent 37 and the others are headed there now with Matron in a spiral plane, but Spoiler doesn't want to sit around Gotham twiddling her thumbs. Much as she might want to join them, she's reminded that Mother is planning something big, and it could be global, so there's no time to pick them up. Somnus is powerful, but the signal Mother wants to send will still need powerful receivers, likely already situated in the right spots. She's had a mad-on for Batman for so long, the old woman has undoubtedly targeted Gotham as well, and whatever she's planning could start within hours. They'll contact them later as needed, and Spoiler is again feeling like she's not wanted or useful, a feeling she thought she was past ever since her stint as Batgirl. She takes off on her own without telling Barbara where.
Steph heads to the vacant Batcave, grabbing a breathing mask from a compartment of about a dozen, and approaches a Batplane. Glaring at it, telling herself to jump inside, fire it up, fly to the North Pole, and do her part in bringing Mother down. Maybe make a quick stop to see if Santa Claus wants to team up.
As the Bat proteges close in on her base, we'd get a flashback of Mother's origin. There was never really anything wrong with it, as formative villain histories go, but I'd want more visual representation of how the adults were doing wrong as she saw it, getting away with it or making their children pay for their misdeeds. The army would hang around, cause trouble, but one soldier would take a shine to the indentured barmaid, not in a sexual way, but enough to ease her timidity and demonstrate for her a few of his knife skills. When the massacre starts, she'd put those skills to use, even on that soldier whom later killed one of her friends in cold blood. Instead of wandering to a nearby village, the girl would find a few survivors, all of them children, and thus became their new mother. Blaming the corrupt adult leaders, she trained herself and her charges in the ways of combat and subterfuge, eventually contributing to a singular pool of wealth so they could care for other children they'd find abandoned. Over the years, her network grew in size and influence as Mother carefully observed and planned accordingly, such as when she became aware of Spiral. Some who were with her in the beginning questioned the severity with which she disciplines some of her charges, some of the orders she gives. It's a point of contention, but Mother handles it with grace, though we'd get later panels with children mourning sudden deaths of these dissenters as time went on. Her deal with Crane is elaborated upon a bit more, but we focus on her own people studying the fear gas for their own purposes, as well as developing the persuasive signal they dub Ichthus. They created their own variety of fear gas, meant to become inert in open air after a few minutes, so that Mother's voice through Ichthus will seem all the more comforting, and victims would be more susceptible to her whims. With the anger at the state of the world or their own lives, it proves effective on children not integrated into her fold already. She never had a need for mind-altering with those she found, but I'd hint that there's more to her so-called benevolence she doesn't reveal to her kids.
I mean, standard stuff. Code to the V-chip on the TV, where she keeps the liquor, how the Tooth Fairy gets in and out of her base so easily, but, more than that.
In present day, Poppy arrives at the base, handing the materials necessary to take over Somnus over to Mother's technicians. Everything's going smoothly, and that's expected to continue, even as Mother anticipates the arrival of Batman's successors. Orphan Prime, having used a faster personal craft, arrives a short time later, feeling his place is at Mother's side at her time of victory. He confirms other orphans in Gotham are prepared, as are the fear gas canisters. Mother is informed by different operatives that other cities are also prepared, Paris, Tokyo, and London just to start. After a few hours, Grayson and his team arrive, with the plan on autopilot because Matron isn't going to sit this one out. Instead of fighting through goons, they enter the base rather easily. We flash back to a conversation back at Spiral HQ before heading out, where Grayson suggested something his boss didn't like, but given the circumstances, she had little other option. In the here and now, she warns him not to make her regret agreeing. Mother greets them casually, her young workers never wavering as they prepare to take Somnus and coordinate with their fellow operatives. Agent 37 gives the megalomaniac one final chance to stand down, if only for formality's sake, but it's refused as several orphans, Prime included, emerge to challenge our heroes. An epic fight breaks out, with Mother perfectly calm the entire time, because they've just taken hold of Somnus.
The next step is to release fear gas on an unsuspecting populace, starting with Gotham, as a final middle finger to Batman, even if he doesn't have the memory to really get that it's aimed at him. You know what? Mother will know. That's good enough for her.
Bat Gordon is already on the chaotic streets, protected by his mech suit, which is also equipped with an antidote for the gas. Hey, if you're going to be Batman, you gotta prepare. But he won't have enough for all the children, so he calls in to police headquarters to get more prepped. Across town, Batgirl has used her old Oracle hacking skills to pinpoint a transmitter that is likely part of Mother's plan. Her gas mask ready, she's about to take the device out, only for orphan assassins to show up to stop her. It's becoming too much, but she's saved by Duke, with the same kind of mask protecting him. He explains that his crew was left a bunch of them with a note telling them to be prepared, signed Spoiler. She even signed her name with a bat dotting the I. A tiny bat. Worth the effort, Steph announces on the scene as she backs up the less experienced Duke. At the Arctic base, the orphans are fighting with greater fervor in Mother's name, as Somnus is finally under her control. The fear gas has infected Gotham City's children long enough that Ichthys will be like a sweet song, coaxing them to her will, and after an hour, their minds will adjust to implicitly trust Mother, even without Ichthys, as much as any of those she personally raised. Say farewell to Gotham, dears. The signal is activated and the children that were previously horrified now begin calming down, before repeating the name of their new leader. Throughout this time, we'd also get panels to various members of Batman Inc. in cities across the world. Night Runner in Paris, Batman of Japan and Tokyo, Knight in London, as they contend with orphan assassins and now children to try and restrain without hurting them.
Well, some of them are in their late teens, so it's not like their hands are completely tied.
Finally, a good reason to punch a teenager in the face. Let's roll!
With more cities on her devious docket, Mother is feeling very proud, even when some of her orphans are knocked out and Grayson, Tim, and Jason confront her. She says that there were some striking similarities between herself and their surrogate father, taking in children, training them to do what needs to be done, but he never went to the extent for actual change. He was too comfortable living in luxury by day and passing his tantrums off as justice by night, and he poisoned his wards with the same flaws, the same lies, whereas she never misled her flock. Grayson counters that she's conflating the barest of similarities to the point that it's almost funny. Batman taught them to face their fears, see all the angles, do what was right, not what was easy. And then Jason shoots Mother in the face. His fellow former Robins think he just killed her, but Red Hood doesn't flinch as the old woman gets up, saying, "And sometimes, justice is more important than vengeance." He'd use non-lethal rounds, saying he really has changed, and he'll wait as long as necessary for the Bat family to recognize that. Mother, however, is a tough old bird, and is only a bit rattled by the assault. She sheds her coat to reveal her battle togs as several of her younger operatives start lunging at the three. Black Bat leaps in, having disabled Orphan Prime for the moment. "We set them up, she knocks them down," as Red Hood puts it, as he and Red Robin defend against the children long enough for Cass to nerve-strike them into submission. Matron joins Richard in facing Mother, who proves a fair match, so confident that she tells her kids operating Somnus to keep working. "I think that's long enough," says a voice Mother's never heard before, one that has overridden her control over Spiral Satellite. Video footage of the first few cities see the previously violent children now confused and docile. Ichthys has been stopped, and the old woman wants to know why, and how. Grayson and Matron look at each other. "Don't say it." "I told you she'd come through." "You're fired."
What happened? Proxy happened. Matron begrudgingly granted her appropriate codes to connect to Somnus. She used that to piggyback her way into Mother's systems and take them over, satellite included. Since Mother had developed her own strain of fear gas to be viable in the air for only a couple of minutes, all the better for Ichthys to better negate it and control its victims, Wendy simply shut the signal down moments later so that there'd be no long-term effects.
And for anyone still affected by the fear gas, Alfred is flying over Gotham in a bat plane dispersing an antidote across the city. Damian does the same with his ride in London, since it wasn't that far from Spiral HQ, getting some antidote canisters from Dr. Netz. Tokyo and Paris will take a bit longer, since the bat agents there don't have a lot on hand, but hey, one hacker can only do so much. I could see there being a much shorter flashback with Damian training with his dad, where he's told that each of his predecessors, even Stephanie Brown, have a quality Damian could stand to learn. Proxy also did a little digging into the evildoer's files, cross-referencing the names Batman had compiled, and what a treasure trove she found. Young Miss Harris remarks that, yeah, Mother is similar to bats, in that they have some extensive and detailed information on their systems. In Big Mama Psycho's case, that includes chronicling her adoptions, from the kids she found on the streets to those that lost their families to tragic circumstances, including those whose parents she deliberately murdered, along with any dissenters in her ranks. For years, the kids thought that Mother had been a savior, a light through the darkness that offered them a home, purpose, and the skills to survive after chance had ripped their old lives asunder. And while that was true for some, she found kids that she thought had great potential and straight up plotted the deaths of their parents, then swooped in as they were overtaken by sorrow and fear to comfort them as a means of molding them in her image. Scarecrow's gas combined with Ichthys was a means of doing the same thing on a global scale, from the comfort of her own home. Not only does Proxy bring these truths to light in Mother's base, she also broadcasts the names of children who lost loved ones specifically because of Mother, directly to the comm units of orphan assassins around the world.
The revelation that they've effectively been lied to this whole time by someone that they trusted, even if she was strict, devastates Mother's children. Parents who actually loved their kids were murdered by someone they believed in, who gave them hope. Even the ones that were legitimately orphaned or abandoned can't stand for what she did, and this seems to rattle Orphan Prime the most.
He worked his entire life to prove himself to Mother, become her right hand, for a cause he'd championed despite the astronomical body count it'd produce. He's in shock at this news, barely able to move. Something so integral to her foundation of trust was a complete lie. Matron tells the children that they've got spiral transports on the way to collect them, and if they go peacefully and are willing to testify against their leader, they'll be shown leniency, given second chances. Some are too busy crying over the deception, but they have siblings that help guide them to the exit. Mother begins yelling at them that they'll only be tricked into letting the world suffer and helping more evil to flourish. She's about to slay one teenager as a show of force, only for her hand to be stayed by Blackbat. No, they'll help the right way. No killing, but they must choose the right path. Mother fights Cass for a bit, but is of course outmatched, so she throws some smoke bombs to escape into the lair, grab a jet, and try and salvage what she can. Grayson and Cassandra give chase, while the others lead the children to safety. They close in on her as they see Orphan Prime down further in the corridor, and Mother is relieved that someone remains loyal. She walks past him nonchalantly, expecting him to cover her escape, only for his dagger to pierce her heart.
I believed in you. I killed for you. I trusted your cause enough to abandon my name, and you lied to me! Did my parents really die in that accident? What is my real name?
I swear to God.
Swear to me!
He glares angrily as her life slips away, to the horror of the crime fighters that are powerless to stop it. Mother whispers something, too softly for anyone other than her killer to hear, if it was coherent at all, and then falls to the ground, dead. Orphan walks away, sheathing his blade without cleaning it, and turns a corner as Grayson tries to stop him, but a small explosive is set off, blocking the way with ice and debris.
Yeah, no self-destructing fortress. Spiral decides to confiscate it instead, hopefully use what they find for less evil purposes. But it's a Pyrrhic victory when they discover Matron's favorite mug was broken in the fight. But hey, she still takes in the manipulated kids and finds them new homes where she can. Still, it was a pretty awesome mug.
It's a couple days later in Gotham, and Spoiler is visiting Scarecrow, who's about recovered from his injuries. Strangely, the doctor thanks the young woman. When he'd been poisoned and she was asking for information, he recognized fear in the young woman's eyes, likely at the prospect of failing to save him or the city, but something else he couldn't quite put his finger on. Without that trepidation, he might not have given any information. She swings away, feeling like she'll need a week-long shower to feel clean again, and keeping to herself the fear the doctor couldn't pinpoint was Steph feeling like perhaps she was reverting to her much less capable self when she was just starting out. She meets with Batgirl on a rooftop. Babs brings up how she thought Steph was going to fly to the Arctic alone, and the blonde admits that was her intention at first. She wanted to be at the big battle, deck the bad guy, share in a huge victory. But some pieces started falling into place as she walked closer to the Batplane. The time it'd take to get there, even at top speed, what things would be like once she arrived, and the state of things in Gotham with one less crime fighter that knows what's going on. So she opted to lend Duke's team some gas masks so they can do their part. After years of struggling to be accepted by her caped peers, and concerned she'd somehow regressed, Stephanie almost lost her sense of priorities.
It's almost like she's a developed but flawed character that doesn't cow to one of the worst creations in all of comics. What a wacky notion.
A couple weeks later, Bruce has regained his memories and is back as Batman, gathering not just with his Robins, but all his sidekicks. Instead of a rooftop, I imagine this happening in the Batcave. He admits he was afraid of the parallels between him and Mother, but largely because he wasn't aware of the differences she was hiding. Since she's for real dead now, her autopsy revealed she had dental implants on 2 teeth, meaning she had one breakable tooth with cyanide and another that had the antidote, explaining how she survived when Bruce visited her school and confirming his suspicions that the cremation was a decoy. Alfred interjects, saying that some similarities to Batman proved beneficial. Mother, too, made mistakes, thinking that attacking Spiral Agent Grayson would assure her victory instead of tip him off, and that she overlooked certain X-Factors like Wendy Harris, who smiles from her computer.
Yeah, Jason says, Mother really gave capable old folks a bad name. Watch your words, Master Jason.
Hood wouldn't admit it, but he liked hearing that again. Bruce commends everyone for their efforts, including Proxy over comms. Damian laments not joining the action.
The fight would have ended much quicker had I been there,
Tim snarks.
Or at least it would have been noisier.
Spoiler sees where the kid's coming from, for reasons previously stated. Bats muses that Duke and his Robins will need a closer look, but to his personal allies, he says he's proud of all of them, taking special note of Jason's efforts to reform. While he's in no hurry to die, he'd do so knowing that he left Gotham and this world in capable hands. They get an alert that the Royal Flush Gang is stirring up trouble, and we get a splash page of the whole team swinging, gliding, and swooping into action, with a narration caption saying,
"Let's show them our gang."
Yeah, I know, really cheesy, but hey, no more so than bring all the Robins.
And we'd get a surprise epilogue. A few of the orphan assassins have gathered in an unnamed place, debating what to do next. They were not as devastated by the revelations Proxy leaked, and are still committed to Mother's vision of calling the world of its malefactors. Someone in shadow says that's all well and good, but they can't make the same mistakes she did. They'll need to fashion new names for themselves, something other than orphans, but they can still use Mother's considerable resources and remaining finances for their own ends. And we see that the new leader of this ragtag group is Poppy. The last sight we see is of Orphan Prime, or now just Orphan, standing alone in the middle of nowhere, having to decide what his next move will be.
Thus concludes this exhaustive thought experiment. A lot of fillers being cut, fewer plot holes, I hope, no advertising for cerebral elements that aren't there, no hackneyed retcons, no useless characters. What did you think of this installment? Did I leave out any details? Should I have included Harper Row being thrown to a pack of hungry rabid badgers? Share your thoughts in the comments and take care. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.